Hello, everyone. Great to have you here. Welcome to QE Babble. For anyone that's new, QE Babble is all about bringing together different perspectives from across the industry, having honest conversations about topics that are really noisy in our world right now. For me, there's nothing noisier than this, and that is that the way that people look for work has changed massively. Candidates are competing against massive application volumes. We've got AI-generated CVs, automated screening tools, hiring processes with multiple stages, technical tests, and at the same time, hiring teams are trying to understand how to ascertain what genuine capability is from hundreds of applications that increasingly can look quite similar. So we're going to try and lift the lid on that and look at what actually happens when a CV lands in front of a hiring team. The aim is to give some really valuable insights into what it looks like on the other side of things. So what grabs attention, what gets potentially overlooked, what mistakes might candidates be making, and how is AI changing the way that both candidates and employers approach the hiring process. I think there might be some misconceptions potentially on that. So we'll try and talk about some of those. So to help answer the questions, we've got a brilliant panel who have agreed to come on today, which is very, very nice of them. Between them, they've reviewed thousands of applications, hired hundreds of people, and have a unique perspective on what genuinely stands out in today's market. So a massive welcome and thank you to Dan, Laura, and Matt. Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
So as always, these aren't webinars. They're not sessions where we do absolutely all the talking and don't expect any interaction. We'd really love to get people to ask questions that we can try and answer towards the end of the session. You know, those questions about some of the topics we've spoken about already. So let's get started. If it's okay, Dan, I'll come to you first. So just give us a short introduction into what you do, if you don't mind, and then tell us about when you're hiring, what actually happens when CVs land at your company.
Okay, so I'm Dan. I've been in quality for 26 years now. It's crazy. And I've been leading, managing and hiring for teams for about 16 years. So I've been at it quite a while. When CVs come to us, I mean, we're quite a small software company, below 200 employees. So it's still very much a manual process. We will go through the pile of CVs, and I hate to say it, but the first thing I'm trying to do is reduce that pile any way I can, because as you said just then, Matt, you know, the volume is insane. And you can't, unfortunately, we don't have the time and resources to interview 100 people or anywhere close to that number. So my initial process is to go through and discount as many people as possible and try and get that number down to maybe a dozen candidates that look promising. And so the sort of things that may or may not get you removed. Personal hate of mine is if you put the ISTQB logo on your CV. A lot of people do that, and it's a nice to have. You know, no one's going to hire you just because you have that certification, and it takes up space that could be used for perhaps highlighting more valuable things. The second thing I'm looking for is your LinkedIn profile. You know, CVs are very much a knock on the door, a high level, hey, I'm interested in this role, but I'm going to dive into your LinkedIn. If you haven't got a picture, that's a bit concerning. If you've got just a job or two and no real details what those jobs are, again, that's possibly a red flag. I want to see people who are, you know, talking about quality, who are going to meetups, who are trying to contribute to the wider sphere of learning in the community. And once we have that initial shortlist, our recruitment team will then call them up and go through a section of questions, you know, very high level, just to get a good feel. And, you know, because we are such a small, close-knit team, you know, I've got 12 people, including myself, in the team. The number one question I'm looking for is, are you a good team fit? You know, product knowledge can be taught, technical knowledge can be taught. I want to understand that you're not going to rock the boat, that you're going to fit in well, that you're going to contribute and bring something new and unique to the table. And so I'm also looking for fundamental test acumen, I guess is the best way of putting it. You know, curious nature, people who want to push, pull, press buttons, people who understand truly that, you know, quality is probably more about highlighting everything in a release than perhaps the actual quality of the software. You know, we don't decide what's fixed, we decide what's raised, and let stakeholders decide the risk and whether we should release that version of the software.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. So we're talking there about what you're looking for when you screen them, and I want to come back to that if I can, because what I want to try and focus on now, and I think you've probably clarified, is that the CVs, by the sounds of it, are screened manually.
Yep, we still screen CVs manually, although I believe our recruitment team are beginning to look into the AI sphere. And sort of touching briefly on that, I know you want to speak about AI a bit later. We are quite diving deep into the world of AI as a team, as a quality team. So one of the things I am looking for on that CV is how far you as a candidate has dived into AI. I don't feel in the modern world you should have nothing about AI on your CV. You should at least be looking at the tools and trying to understand how they might make you more efficient, help, you know, shore up processes and things like that.
Okay, thank you. And you've made some good points there. I'm going to come back to those about how you screen for things like test acumen, but we'll come back to that. Cheers, Dan. Matt, thanks for joining.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. You want me to talk about how we screen the CVs then first?
Yeah. What happens in your world?
So in our world, a bit like Dan, we're quite a small, very niche consultancy. We've got a very niche part of financial services, and we very much manually screen the CVs. We do use a lot of associate people, so we do have a sort of database of people that we go to with the specific skills. But I can give an example. Last year, we were hiring a very senior person into the team, and we put it on LinkedIn, and within an hour we had reached our limit that we were allowed to get CVs on, and I just think that that's one of the problems in the industry. It's far too easy for people to click a button on LinkedIn and apply. Some of those CVs that come in weren't up to date. It's because the LinkedIn will store your latest CV, so it wasn't there. So what we look for on CVs is, you know, how we screen them. Sorry, is that we look at them manually first, all within the team. There's a big team of us with quality experience, and we look for key attributes on that, and then, as Dan said, it is horrible to say, but the first thing we're looking at is getting that number down. If we have one job, we certainly can't interview 300 applicants, which is what we had for that senior role. So we're just looking for things that will discount them immediately. One of our particular ones that we can't do at the moment, just because of the size of the company, is we can't offer any sponsorship to anyone at the moment. So if people aren't in the UK or need sponsorship, we have to turn them down, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so similar then to Dan, the CVs come in and they are manually looked at by you and or other members of the team.
Exactly that. Yeah, we are not. At the moment, we're not using AI, but it is something that we're bringing in. Whether that will be used in the screening process or not, at the moment, we're not quite sure. But it is a valuable tool, but it's not going to do the job for us.
Yeah. Okay. I'll come back to that point as well. But thank you, Laura. Thanks for coming on QBabble again.
No worries. You want me to? I work for the Scale Factory now, not 1010. We rebranded 3 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
So now is a good launch pad for that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us what happens on your side of the fence then, because I know from talking to you before, you generally have lots of open roles. I'm sure you get huge volumes of people coming through.
Yeah, I mean, everything the guys have said so far absolutely resonates. It's a crazy market that hasn't changed for a couple of years now. It's not like it doesn't sound like we're going to move away from that. It's not going to slow down at all. It's getting worse, if anything. So for us, we have a tool that has AI capability. We're not using it for screening at this point. There is the ability to do that. I haven't investigated it enough yet. To be honest, I don't think. Well, firstly, I haven't got enough time, but also just we're on the edges. We're starting to use it in different areas. At the minute for screening, it doesn't feel like the right choice. I'd kind of flip what Matt and Dan said on its head, and instead of kind of discounting people, we work from the bottom up. So we would look for the nice to haves as a starting point, as opposed to discounting the things that we don't want. So previously, if you were a good test consultant or a good QA engineer, whatever it needs to be, generally you can turn your hand to a lot of different industries. You can probably turn your hand to a lot of different technologies. That's not the difficult thing to teach. And I don't think that's changed. Ultimately, on the ground, that can still happen. But in a pool of 800 candidates, if I can find someone who's already worked in that industry, that's already used the right tools and technologies, who's got experience in that space, they're going to be the first one that I go to. So for me, I look for the perfect candidate as a starting point. And that's why my advice to candidates is always to think about what your niche is, what sets you apart from another candidate. And if you're applying for a role, do you have the key things, or the key experience that they're asking for? And is that really obvious on your CV? Because if it's not, you're not the first person that they go to. And it could be laborious, and you might need to change your CV and update things and amend it for different roles. But ultimately, if you can stand out against 800 people, then that's going to give you more chance of getting an interview.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And standing out is what we're gonna come on to next. Because hopefully there's some views on how we can on how we can do that. And you mentioned about making sure that you when you're looking at CVs, you're looking at what's the perfect person first, and then working it back.
Work back from that. Yeah.
And talking about niches as well, and making sure that people understand what their core area of expertise, and then laser focused on that. Just before I move on, actually, let me ask you a quick question on that. So I completely agree that definitely you need to understand what your key niche is, and what you're a subject matter expert on. That'll give you the best chance. Is it still worth them applying for jobs that aren't completely aligned to?
That's difficult, because it depends if anyone else has got the skills that I need. So I wouldn't say it's pointless. You definitely put your CV up, but why would be my question. Like, why are you applying for that role? Because you need a job isn't going to fly at an interview. That isn't going to be a good enough reason as to why you should be the right candidate. But if you can explain why you're the right fit for that role, then apply for it. And as long as that's clear on your CV, then apply for it. But you're also devaluing your CV. If I've got a system where I've got one candidate that's applied for 17 different jobs, all at different levels, all with different skills, all with different technologies and everything like that, that doesn't give me a good feeling about the fact that they are the right person for this specific role. So yeah, there's a catch-22 there. I haven't answered your question. Sorry, I'm not going to.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It was a difficult, maybe an unfair question to ask you anyway, if I'm honest. I think I personally think the honest answer is that nothing should stop you applying for a job that you want to apply to. Simple as that. If you want to apply, but obviously bear in mind that given the applicant numbers, if you're not very well aligned, then you've got to put it down as one that you've got a very low chance of getting on. Which means that everyone on the call will be getting a lot of CVs for that very reason. But I don't necessarily think it's a reason not to apply personally. But it's difficult, isn't it? But thanks, Laura.
Sorry, Matt. That's a really interesting point, because a lot of this is very context driven, right? And I, as a candidate, have actually done that with a local company who are, again, quite a small software developer. And I actually applied to 3 or 4 different roles because, you know, a quality person does move into different kind of spheres. And that actually resulted in me getting a call from the CTO. And they were like, hey, you've applied for all of this. Why? And I'm like, I actually really like this company. I really believe in your mission. And we just had a chat about what I could potentially offer. And it didn't actually lead to a role at the end of the day. But it does depend on who you're applying to as to whether something like that tactic could add value, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. Let me ask you, Dan, while we're talking then. So from your side, so you get, scenario is you get 150 responses for one job. You've only got one seat to fill. You've got 150 people to look at. You're screening those CVs. You're doing it manually. You've mentioned a couple of things that you potentially don't like on a CV, but what actually is making them stand out, and how are you bringing that number down?
You know, obviously in the lead up to this, I thought a lot, and I genuinely have this massive long list of what helps me get rid of CVs. And it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what will get you through. Laura's not wrong. You know, that first wave, once I've gone through that position of trying to get the pile down, I am then looking to see if the tech stack aligns, if there's things in the CV that I can relate to, that feels like it will be a good addition to the team. If there's anything there, again, that might put me off. It's when people say, oh, I did this and it improved things by 70%. And I'm like, okay, but there's nothing to back that up. It's just a bold claim. And really, I'm looking at that kind of core skill set that shows you understand when automation is of value and when manual can add to the process, you know, whether you're using AI, whether you're contributing to quality in terms of going to meetups, you know, doing talks like this, trying to help the wider community. And of course, general things, you know, experience, yeah, and again, fit for the role, things like that.
Okay, thanks. Matt?
Yeah, again, for me, and it might be glaringly obvious, but the way we're talking here, and all of us, all 4 of us on this panel, have to do the same thing. We get lots of CVs, and people just repeat the same CV. You've got to remember that your CV is your chance to sell yourself to get to the next stage. And that's the important bit. And whether you've got a personal description at the top or not, you've got to make sure, because I'm not saying anybody on here, but some people, you've got about 30 seconds to impress, and then it goes into the maybe pile or something like that. So make sure it stands out, make sure it impresses, make sure you're selling yourself first. Also, make sure that you've read the job description of what you're applying for and try and highlight that somehow in your CV. It might have been 1 job ago, it might have been 2 jobs ago, but it's worth maybe just putting it in bold later in your CV so it drags the person's eye to it. It's all these sorts of things, and don't just keep using the same CV. I had somebody apply for a job not that long ago, well, maybe a few years ago, and they were using a CV that was 15 years old, and it didn't have their last 3 jobs on it. And I'm like, I can go to LinkedIn and quickly cross-reference that and see, well, you've worked in all these other places, which is actually giving you more up-to-date experience. So alter your CV for the role that you're applying for and make sure that you're selling yourself in that first few minutes. That's what I would say. Selling
yourself in those first few minutes?
Yeah, of reading.
Okay, and on that point then, what would you, sorry, I know this might be a bit of a challenging question, but what would you define as selling yourself per se?
So talk about your experience. Talk about what you've done. What I don't know. What things you've enjoyed doing. What things you've added benefit to, whether it be a client or the company that you're working for. What sorts of things that you've worked on that are maybe not your normal executing test cases or whatever you've done or thought about. Well, if we move this regression pack and it's automated, it's going to save X percentage time. But a bit more thought into what you're doing, what you like doing, where you see yourself going if you're younger than me anyway. But all that sort of stuff. Put that in. Put some personal information in as well. It takes it away from that mundane. Yeah. I've used AI to enhance my CV, and it's no longer about a person.
Who you are behind experience. 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
can I ask that as well? Sorry.
Go on. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to say, if you want to sell something, you've got to know who you're selling to and what you're selling it for. So unless you know what the role's about and what the job actually involves, you can put anything on there and it could be a load of waffle. But if you know what the role is, you know why you're relevant for it, and you know why you're a good fit, move your CV around and put that at the top. I've always said, don't be afraid to move things around and bring the eye to I would say AI has helped with things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the top, because an AI can actually summarize and bring your experience out depending on what it is that you're looking for. But for example, if you are doing lots of ERP implementations, you've got experience in lots of those systems, let that be the first line of your achievements. Let that be the first line of your experience. Talk about why that's relevant to the role that you're applying to. But if you don't know what the role is that you're applying to, you don't know what they're looking for, then you can't sell yourself on it because it's irrelevant. I could talk to you about my dogs, but actually you love cats, so it's irrelevant, right?
You did talk about your dogs.
I might do that quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but going back to Matt's point about that personal information, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, obviously, but like it does set you apart, because it is by its very nature unique. And with the volumes that we're talking about, anything that's unique often gets gets latched onto straight away, because it's just different for the reader, isn't it?
And it goes back to what Dan was saying about we're trying to find somebody that's also a good team fit as well. That personal information can really help that. Obviously, if you get to interview stage, we find that out quite quickly, but I think that personal information can help that, right?
Yeah, let me ask you another question on that, actually, because obviously team fit, no one's going to deny is going to be an important attribute for any job in any company. But getting that just through the written word on a CV, that's really difficult. So personal information is one way that you might be sort of assessing team fit. Is there anything else on a CV that would help you to decide whether they might be the right team fit and worth an interview?
Use LinkedIn.
Use LinkedIn.
Use LinkedIn. Post on LinkedIn. Put your point across. Share information. Share your knowledge. Share your experience. Talk about why it's relevant. Like, help people using LinkedIn. I'm such an advocate for posting. Obviously, you might have seen that as well. But I met someone at an event last year, and he had lots of experience in retail. His CV was really generic around quality engineering, but he built this amazing AI tool that was assessing different platforms and how they work and all of this stuff. And a lot of it went over my head, to be honest. But I was like, have you told anyone about this? And he went, well, no. And it wasn't on his CV. And I said, well, why don't you post about it on LinkedIn? Tell everyone what you've done. Share it with your audience and let people see what the amazing work that you're doing. And within 2 weeks, he had another job.
There you go. Absolutely. And that's why I just flashed at what Alex said there, because he's basically asked the question that you just answered. And then we just had Suman as well ask a question, which I'm just going to put on in a second. She's asked just about, could we have an example of how to bring someone's personality to life in the CV? And perhaps the answer is yes, quite difficult to do in a CV, but obviously LinkedIn gives you different tools and different ways of doing that, through use of video, through use of pictures, through various different means, recommendations that you can have on there. And also, another sort of technique for this would be to, okay, so we're just talking about the CV, but why don't you make the first thing on your CV a link to your GitHub, or a link to a blog that you've done, or to potentially a talk you've done somewhere. All of those are kind of actions that you can take. No one's going to stop you from doing any of those things, but they can all help to differentiate you from another candidate who's written an AI generated CV. So yeah, some good points there. Thank you. We'll talk about mistakes to avoid. Obviously, just to frame this, I think we're all clearly acutely aware of how difficult it is to search for work, and how some people, maybe even people watching, are finding it difficult. So if we're talking about mistakes to avoid, then we're trying to make any of these points really practical and helpful. But is there anything, Matt, if I come to you first, that you think that candidates probably should avoid doing when they're applying? Maybe not just in the CV, but anything to do with the application process itself?
I'm not sure that there is anything that they shouldn't do other than what we've mentioned, which is don't just bash your CV in. I don't randomly apply. I think Laura summed it up really well when she said, I need a job is not a reason to apply for that role, right? So don't do it. Everybody, and listen, we know the market the last 2 years, and going back to a previous point when we were talking about should I apply for that job, before the market went like it is, we used to say if you've got 50-60% of the skills they're asking for, you're a good candidate. But it's not the case now, because there are so many good people looking for work. So I wouldn't apply just because I need a job. I would do a bit of research on that company as well. I know time is quite precious between the job going live and then we're not taking any more applications, certainly that I've seen. But do a bit of research on the company. Make sure that you understand the company ethos that you're getting into. What are their core values? Dan said there he applied for 4 roles with one company because he liked the company values. He liked the way that they work. Have a look at that. You can bring that out on your CV in your personal summary as well. If it's something that matches to your core values and beliefs as well, you're going to be a good fit. So maybe the answer is don't forget to do the research on the company. Don't forget to read the job description, whether it's on LinkedIn and you have to delve a bit deeper, or go to the website of the company and understand it. But do a bit of research. I did a graduate career fair a couple of months ago, and out of all the students, one of them stood out because he said, I did a lot of research on your company, Matt, and really like what you're doing and know who your charities are and things like that. And I was just like, wow, that's a student, never had a job yet.
Brilliant.
You can do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Dan, what about you? Is there anything that you think that people should probably avoid doing because it isn't helpful, or it's actually counterproductive completely?
I mean, there's a lot. I could spend all day listing off things that irritate me, or will probably put you out of that pile on those initial reviews. And I've already covered quite a few of them, right? I would say, it's a human element. A lot of these questions are like, how do I avoid being automatically rejected and things like that? And yes, that happens, but it certainly doesn't happen with us. So if you come across braggy, arrogant, that will probably get you removed. I want someone who's a team player, who works together, who builds relationships and build bridges with all the other teams we have to work with and my team itself. So really stick to the facts, keep it very clear what you've done. I can assess the impact of that. I've worked in quality for a long time, so I understand what you're talking about. You don't have to necessarily explain in greater detail. You also have to have some things for the interview. If you're laying it all out on your CV straight away, you're probably not going to fare well if you do get an interview. So there's definitely a balancing act, definitely a human nature involved. And try and be personable, try and put in a bit of your personality, you know, try and get across who you are, like I said earlier, behind the experience.
Okay, cheers. Thanks, Dan. Laura, anything that you think people should do generally that isn't helping them?
Well, sorry, I actually really disagree with that, Dan. Unfortunately, I love a braggy CV. Tell me why you're amazing. Tell me why you're brilliant. I want to hear it. And I feel like in a CV and in a job interview, it's a one time where you can really brag about yourself because you're brilliant and you're right for, but make sure it's right for the role. It's got to be relevant, right? You don't want someone who's just come in and tell you how amazing they are with no relevance whatsoever. And the only other thing I say don't do is don't lie. Because eventually it's all going to come out. We are definitely
just write it down. Don't lie. Okay.
It's more common than you might think. People think that they are getting blocked by an AI to get an interview, so they lie about things on their application form, and then they get an interview, and then it turns out that that's not actually the truth, and they shouldn't have had an interview in the first place. It's not the AI that's blocking them. It's very much curated by a human, and there's a reason why it's in place. So yeah, lying is annoying. Also, don't use bots to try and do your interviews. That's really annoying as well. Don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I would say it's a fairly obvious one that people are trying to interview humans, aren't they? And there's so many different ways you can innovate now in looking for work, both in the application and also in the interview. But obviously what they're looking to hire for is your personal core competencies. Tools wrap around that, don't they? Increasingly tools wrap around people's skill set more and more, and AI is a big tool, but the interview is about your core competencies that you're bringing to the table. Sorry,
although the reverse is true there, I did read an article on LinkedIn from a chap that had interviewed for a PM role, and he was interviewed by AI as a first stage. And I'm like, wow, not the best idea.
Yeah.
I don't know how it went and why this person submitted himself to an AI interview. It would, I would withdraw my application if it was me. What's that telling you? You've removed the person from the interview process now.
It's becoming so much more common now to have, so there's tools that you can have where that first stage, and you'd be surprised by how realistic it can be actually, because it can look just like I could record it myself and then it talks to the candidate over video, and you do that first stage. And I think these tools have they've emerged to try and combat the volume that AI has also brought to the table in terms of applicants. So it's a way to screen candidates to get more information from them than just a CV in quick time, because it's done using AI, obviously. I do agree with you, though, personally. I think it takes away the personal touch. And I think ultimately that is what recruitment should be about. And at the center of everything, it's all about people. And we should really try and retain that. That's the one thing that we do have that robots can't take away from us. So we should be doing more of that. But I think in much larger organizations where there's a lot more recruitment going on, there's a lot of varied roles, different types of things, it has a place. I've seen it be successful, but the type of person who responds to that as well is different. So yeah.
Yeah. So some really good points being made, which we're going to get to. I'll just flash this one up. It's one that I'm big on, definitely, when I'm looking. Irina, so thanks for the point. She said, what about recommendations from people you've worked with on LinkedIn? I've got a view on this, but I just want to get an idea from the panel of, like, is that something that you recognize? Dan?
Interesting question, because this is actually from one of my team who's worked with me for many years. Absolutely.
She's looking for a job.
I didn't know that. I came to you first.
Honestly, I will look for recommendations on LinkedIn. It's like getting references without needing to reach out to people and get them. I probably will skim read them and just get a feel for them. But yeah, absolutely, recommendations help.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. At some point in the process, I will cross-reference your CV against your LinkedIn just to and see if you've embellished the truth on your CV. I don't want to use the word that Laura used, but yeah, we can make things sound better than they were. But and recommendations and the person that's made them, I might track that back to the person to make sure that they who they say they are, and you know, if it's a genuine and a good recommendation or a rounded recommendation, it can really help you. And it's come from that person, they've taken the time to do it. So yeah, I would definitely take that into account.
Yeah. Laura?
Yep, love a recommendation.
Yeah.
Love it. Go for it. Add as many as you can. I try and get as many on my profile as I can. So do it.
Yeah, me too. And I couldn't advocate for it anymore with the volumes. I, having done the job for a long time, I'm fortunate to have connected to and spoken to a lot of people. So if I see a recommendation given for a candidate that I'm talking to, and the recommendation is from someone that I know, even better. And I'm sure we've probably all had that situation as well. You know, it's another tick in the box to think, right, yep, this person is highly likely to be someone that I'm going to call about this job now.
And on that note, Matt, I actually look at connections as well. I see who you've connected to on LinkedIn and whether I know them. I have in the past reached out to people that I know closely and said, hey, do you actually know this guy, or is it a random LinkedIn connection? You know, what are your thoughts on them? Again, it's like almost instant referrals and references without needing to go through the process again.
Yeah, and these are all actions that people can take, you know, off their own back, right? You know, you're probably not going to get recommendations if you don't ask for them, being realistic, but it's absolutely something that you can do if you're sort of sitting there thinking, right, how am I going to find the job? That is something you can go out and do today, ask 10 people, maybe get 6 or 7 responses, and all of a sudden you've got a profile matched to a CV with lots of endorsements on. So yeah, there's loads of questions that we want to get to, and I have starred plenty to come back to. Let's just quickly talk about AI then, because we've mentioned it a few times. Laura's just mentioned using AI agents basically to conduct interviews on behalf of companies, which is interesting and is definitely happening. But if we just go back around and just talk about if AI is being used at the moment in the hiring process, if not, any views on like how it might benefit you if you were to use it, starting with you, Matt?
Yeah, as I said at the start, we're not using it at all to screen CVs at the moment. It might be something that we look at using as we bring on board and get our AI capabilities up to date. But again, it's something that is used to enhance the process rather than replace it. We don't want to take the human element out of it. I don't think we could go off and ask AI who it's linked to on LinkedIn and phone somebody up and say, do you generally know this person? Are they any good? Which is, like Dan, something that I will do as well if I've not used the person before. How will it be used? I don't know. That's a tricky one for me.
It
is. It depends what happens in the industry and the market. For the last 2 years, everybody's been talking about this bubble's going to burst at some point, and it's not. So this might be the future, guys. We might have a lot of people applying for every role that we've got out there. So I'm guessing if it does trend the other way, that it gets worse for candidates and there's more people on the market, I guess at some point we're going to have to introduce them for screening CVs. But at this present point, I'm loath to do that because I'm hiring a person, you know, for a career, and I want to know that person. I don't know if AI can tell me enough about that.
Okay. Dan, just to come to you, so clarification on, do you use AI at all at the moment for hiring? If so, what for? If not, what do you think you might be able to do?
So again, very similar to Matt, we're not using it for hiring. I think our recruitment team are looking into how it could be used. Really, when it comes to AI, I'm looking how you're using it, how you're upskilling in this new tool, and I will follow through with that in the interview and ask, have you used it? What have you used? How have you used it? And what use cases there are for making things more efficient, stronger, faster, better, in our QA world. So like I said earlier, I expect some level of I am using AI, or I have written skills, I have built agents, I am diving into this in some way, shape or form. Obviously, it's still very early days, so I'm not expecting, tons and tons of experience in that space, but it's something we are using in our team, and we are trying to put our repetitive, more mundane tasks into AI, so we can free up our team's time to do what they're best at, which is, testing software.
Thank you. Laura?
So we have AI capability in our new system that we put in. I think there's a bit of a misconception about what AI is and what automations are. I think there's a difference. The platform that we use, it's very, I don't know if this is like a rule that has to be rolled out, but it's there's a lot of ethics that are actually involved in making sure that the AI and the system has absolutely no capability to make decisions for you. It cannot do that. It cannot, especially negative decisions, it cannot negatively react to a candidate. So there is no way that AI can reject a CV unless I tell the system to do it. So that is not happening. Just to be really clear, it cannot happen. So everyone who gets very upset about the fact that they think that AI keeps rejecting their CV, it's not happening. That's not what's going on. We have automations in place. So we do have an application form that we ask candidates to fill out. Similarly to what Matt mentioned earlier, things like sponsorship isn't something that we can offer at the moment, unfortunately. And we do have a lot of public sector clients. So we do look for security clearance. So there's a few things in there that we need people to hit certain criteria in order to be able to progress with their application. So automations are in place to help us get through that kind of bulk without having to do that manually. And up until last year, that was all very much manual. I had to go through every single candidate, and you can imagine, like, when I say 800 candidates per role, I'm not even exaggerating. Sometimes it's more. And that would happen in a couple of days. So it was very, very laborious. So automations are in place to help make life easier, but the AI cannot make any decisions for you. It is a human behind it that is making those decisions, and unfortunately, it's because you weren't right for the role.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for answering those questions. We've covered some really good stuff, and it will get summarised at the end. And I'm going to get it sent out to everyone who's watched and anyone who wants it afterwards as well. So I'm going to get some of the questions that we've had that come through. I've got 14 already started. Let's see how many of those we can get to. I'm going to go to this one first, purely because this person works for my favourite car brand that I will never be able to afford, but I know he works there. So this is Joe Brannan, who has asked, and it's a really good question. I know when we did this session previously, and I think Laura was on, the same sort of question was asked, and was a different opinion on this. So I'd love to get your opinion. Should you reach out directly to the person who is hiring for the role using a LinkedIn message, as well as applying in the normal way? Matt, what's your take on that one?
I think it's a really good idea. Personally, I think it is. If you're already linked with me and you see I've got a role, why not just drop me a note saying, Matt, I've put an application in for this role, just so that you know or something. We could maybe start up a conversation. Or if you've linked into me in the past, just as a random one, I don't see there's any harm in it, to be honest, for me.
Dan?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I did have a candidate recently that reached out, and they were, you know, very nice, very polite, just say, hey, I've applied for a role, you know, hope it meets, you know, what you're looking for, and things like that. And we did actually select that CV for the initial interview. Unfortunately, candidate wasn't a right fit. But then there was sort of like quite a few subsequent messages, and I'm like, okay, I don't really have time for this. So again, try and put yourself in our shoes to a degree. You know, if we're getting 150 LinkedIn connection requests, I'll probably just say no to all of them. But if there's a personal message, if there's a reasoning behind reaching out, then happy days. That's awesome and a great thing to do.
Yeah. Laura?
Yes, do it, but only do it if you've got something to say. Because if it's just, oh, I've applied, that's nice, but I've got literally, so there's also on LinkedIn you can send an AI message, and I can tell when you've sent an AI message because it's the same as the 300 other ones that I've got. So if you're going to send it, make sure that if you're going to go to the effort of finding that person and sending them a message, send them a proper message that's actually relevant, make it unique, make it genuine, like pick something that's going to get the attention of that person, and do that. And why are you right for that role? Don't send it for that generic role that you're applying to that you don't really care about, you haven't really looked at the company, you don't really care about the business. Like if you're going to send a message to follow up, make it impactful, or don't bother.
Yeah,
that would be my point.
I completely agree. I was gonna comment on it, but yeah, that is exactly what I think about that as well, because I'm sure, you know, you just mentioned scenario is you've got 1,000 applications. Now, let's remember that it's not the candidate's problem that you've got 1,000 applications, is it? We all realize that, but ultimately they should kind of view their search for work on those terms, that they know that the people who are getting their CV will have a lot to look through. So have something that's actually valuable to say. Don't just click a button and expect that will make things better, because my personal view on that is it does make it worse if it's so disingenuous, in my view, to just to purely follow up with an AI generated response, which takes 1 second and isn't actually what you've written anyway. That doesn't help, because the reality is that there's a lot of people out there who are looking. So that's my 2 pence.
Just to add to that as well, asking for a phone call or for more information about the role without applying for the role, that's also really annoying, because that's just even more time that no one's got.
Okay, yeah, but that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I guess that's probably a fairly similar scenario, a fairly common scenario as well, is that, and we've probably all had this, where someone's looking at a job on your website and they think, oh, that looks quite interesting, I'd like to know a bit more about it. I'm not really ready to apply yet. Do you think they should just, so Laura's given her view, Matt, do you think they should just apply anyway, on the basis that that's the only way they're going to get properly considered anyway?
Yeah, but
if you're not ready to apply for it, don't apply for it. Yeah. Sorry. If you don't know if you're right for it, don't apply for it. End of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, refer back to my earlier point. If you don't think the company is the right fit for you, or you're not the right fit for the company, or you haven't done your research, don't just press that apply now button on LinkedIn, because it's so annoying.
There's a really good question that's come in as well about career breaks, which I think is a topic I'd love to try and cover. I'm going to try and find a question now in amongst the ones that I've screened, but essentially the question is that if you have had time out of work for whatever reason for a number of years, how do you go about talking about that on the CV? Is there a good way of doing that, an effective way of doing that in your opinion? Dan, can I ask you that question?
Yeah, of course. I've seen it. I think there's a time frame involved. If it's maybe a year, maybe 2, I'm not going to be overtly concerned. Just explain what it is. Just tell me. I've had that previously, where I took a career break to raise my children, or there were family issues, and I had a career break to look after my parents as they were elderly, or whatever. Like life happens. That's understandable, right? And we've got to do what we have to do for our commitments, our family, whatever the reason is. But a fast follow-up is going to be, right, so how have you kept current? How are you making sure you're still fit for this industry, fit for this role, fit for this career? And it's important to try and get that across as well. So a short career break is obviously preferable to a long one. And it's just important to really kind of explain what's going on, because we're all human at the end of the day and we understand things like this happen. And make sure, you know, you can back it up with how you're trying to get back in and what you're doing to ensure you're still current and still valuable in what is a very busy marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. That last point's the big one. So why are you still valuable? So I think, as well as explaining it, maybe some more information about how you're going to be, how you're planning to sort of plug back in, if you like. Matt, any views on this?
Yeah, pretty much what Dan said there. It depends on the length of it. 1 to 2 years is not too bad, although we are in a fast-moving industry anyway. But it's more about life happens, and we've all had problems, and you know, children come along and things like that, and you need to take a career break. Totally understandable. It's not going to put me off. Key thing is, how have you managed to keep your skills relevant? What have you done to look at it, to say, right, I'm going back into the workplace in 6 months' time, blah blah blah. What have I done? You know, there's all sorts of things you can do for yourself, like update your skills, do different courses and things, and those things will be a real plus on your CV, because there's a lot of people that are in companies that don't have a training plan that keeps their skills relevant. They're just learning on the job, sort of thing. So do that. Tell us what you've done about catching back up with the industry.
Okay, let me get the next question flashed up again. Something that I think is quite interesting. Sadly, I don't know who's asked this question, because I think I'm not connected to them, but thank you for asking the question anyway. So realistically, how much of an impact does the design and look of a CV relate to quality engineering? Dan mentioned about using images on the CV for certifications, but sort of generally speaking, is it important the CV like looks good and looks cool, or does that not matter at all, Dan?
I'm actually glad you asked this one, because I did see it in the chat. For me, yes, I go through a lot of CVs, and a lot of them have the same very tired old format. So having a bit of color, having some perhaps uniqueness in the layout. I've seen some CVs that really, just looking at them, I'm like, wow, that's actually really nicely laid out, really well designed, you know, very clear, very concise. Yeah, it really can help you stand out from the pile. But like anything, it's a balancing act. You know, I'm looking for the person behind the CV. I'm not, you know, looking for someone who's a really great CV designer. So a really good, impactful design will make me stop, pause, and dive deeper into your CV. But it's the content within that is going to get you that interview.
Okay, thank you. Matt, a view on CVs?
Yeah, I agree. If it makes you stand out, great. But just remember, guys, we're in the quality industry. Please use something to spell check and grammar check it, because if somebody comes to me for a job in quality and there's spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes and all sorts of things on it, I'm going to think, how much attention to detail have they actually paid, and are they going to pay in the job?
Yeah, I saw one yesterday where the last two employers, the name of the employers was spelled incorrectly, and I just thought it's really difficult, because it's the first thing you see, isn't it?
Yeah.
Often, you know, one of the things you look for first is,
we can't help it. We can't help it. We're testers, right?
I'm not a tester, but yeah, I think it's kind of basics, isn't it? But they're really important, you know, fundamental things, aren't they? Let me move on to this. We've only got a few minutes left, and I think this might be a good way potentially for us to kind of finish and put you three on the spot as well. So if a candidate is not, this is fundamental. If a candidate is not receiving recruiter calls, getting responses, have, even though they've got what they consider to be the relevant skills and experiences, what are the first 3 areas you would review, change on their CV or LinkedIn profile to give them a better chance? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. So I'm going to give you mine, actually. So I wrote these down as a sort of question come in. So number 1, avoid AI genericness at all costs. So just don't use stock copy that you can get out of any LLM. It's not going to look good. It will be generic and doesn't really speak to who you are. Get recommendations, absolutely, something you can do straight away. There should be, at the very least, one person you can speak to. Even if you've not worked in IT before, there's probably someone else from your life that you could ask for a recommendation if that's ultimately where you're at and you're starting out. But get something on there. And also with previous employers, tell us who the employer is and what they do. A lot of CVs, and I posted about this last week, a lot of CVs say they work for X company, but they don't tell you what X do. And if it's not a household name, I don't think you should rely on the screener to have to go and Google who that company is. And that gives the context of the work that you've delivered, which is really important. So if you're going to go and work in consulting and you work for a very small consultancy no one's heard of, it may well be useful for that company to know that you've worked in consulting before, but make sure you explain it. So those are my 3. Dan, have you got any? Mate, you don't necessarily need 3, but is there anything that people can do, you think, to immediately give themselves a better chance?
Honestly, this is a really hard question. It's so context driven. Without reading your CV, I would struggle to tell you what you can do to improve it, you know. But clearly, if you feel you have the right skills and experience and you're constantly getting knocked back, something is wrong in your CV and you need to try and mix it up and change it. Perhaps it's the format, perhaps it's the layout, perhaps it's the content. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, you know.
Fair, absolutely fair. Laura?
I would say there's a few things. If you're looking for recruiters to reach out to you for roles, it'd be worth spending time on your LinkedIn profile to look at things like if your job title is actually representative of the job titles that are getting used in the market. So if you call yourself consultant, that means absolutely nothing to anyone. Whereas if you're a quality engineer, make sure that is clear that that's actually the role that you're doing. Make sure that you've got as much information on your LinkedIn page as possible, because recruiters will use keywords depending on the roles that they're looking for. And if you've got all those keywords in your profile, you're more likely to get contacted. And then what I said at the beginning, what is your USP? What makes you different to anyone else that is applying for those roles? If you think about the last 2 or 3 roles that you've done, what were you better at than anyone else? What did your role consist of that no one else did? Or how were you more influential? I don't know. Think about what your USP could potentially be, whether that's a tech stack, whether that's industry. Has all of the companies you've worked for actually been in insurance? Because if that's the case, make sure your CV is heavy on insurance and talk about the systems that you've worked on and the legislations and things like that. Try and maybe just think about what makes you different in the marketplace, and make that really obvious on your CV.
Okay, thanks a lot. Matt, any of you here?
Yeah, I mean, just exactly what the other 2 panelists said and yourself, Matt. But remember, don't just have one CV and just apply for every job with it. Look at it. Sometimes we don't make it easy. I'm guessing Laura and I very much, we don't want to tell the client's name, the end client's name. So you might not, but know the industry that you're going into. You know, we're niche financial services. So make sure you're pulling out those bits. And like I said at the beginning, you've got to sell yourself to get that call back. And this is your opportunity. Now, whether it's the personal stuff, your personal profile summary at the beginning or whatever, and then go through your CV and look where it maps to the type of things that you're dealing with, whether it's platform work or you've worked in the financial services sector. If you've got no financial services background at all, you're going to really struggle, not because that's all we're recruiting for. But we're going to get lots of good people that have got that background, and we're looking for that ideal candidate. So try and sell yourself as much as you can. I would offer to review that CV the same as Dan was to see exactly, because it's quite a hard question to answer if you haven't seen it.
Very true. Yeah, very true. Thanks you three for contributing. Thanks so much. We've done an hour. We could do more. I'm sure we could do a lot more. There's loads more questions we haven't got to, but we did say we're going to do an hour, and we will stick to it. We're just over. So hopefully we'll try and answer some of those questions that have appeared in the chat as well. I'll certainly go back through and try and give some answers to any on there that I feel comfortable doing so. But thanks so much for everyone who's watched. Really busy comment section. Clearly something that people are kind of grappling with, definitely thinking about how AI is changing it all. So I think we picked a good topic, and you've made some really good contributions, three of you. So yeah, thanks again for joining. Thanks everyone for watching. If I can just ask you three to stick around for a second, but I'll end the live stream there. The recording will be available tomorrow, and I'm going to do a transcript which I'll make available as well. So thanks a lot for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.